Hey friends, you're watching BrainStormAcres. I'm Henry.
And I'm Irene.
The question then is, what qualities of the bag do you use when you're constructing? If you use the right kind of fill material, it's Adobe.
Right.
And we've been around Adobe buildings a lot.
Oh yeah, there were a ton of Adobe buildings in New Mexico. We knew several people who lived in Adobe houses, and we actually tried to buy a farm at one point that had an Adobe house. You know, that is honest to gosh Adobe.
It's a mixture of sand and clay and straw.
Yeah, yeah.
An awful lot of people here build effectively with a sandbag, fill it up with the native soil, and call that an earth bag. Well, the problem with that is when that bag starts to deteriorate, and they will,
right?
Because the other kind of deterioration that happens is microbes
right.
that are in the soil will attack the plastic. And yeah, it's not going to be super fast, but it's fast enough. In fact, if you watch some YouTube channels, you'll see earth bags that are actually feed bags that have big holes in them with the soil coming out of the bag.
Right, and one of the things that I always think of when I see those things is we had a couple of earthquakes here in the last 10 years. Now, they're not earthquakes like we used to get in California where you bust your windows and have buildings fall down and stuff like that. But it was enough to crack the corners on the shower and knock out some of the grout on some of the tiles, usually mostly on the corners, because that's a structural weak point, I guess you'd say, in terms of flex. And all I can think of when I see people building with bags that are already falling apart is what happens if we get the right kind of earthquake. Now, by the right kind of earthquake, I mean earthquakes come in all different shapes and sizes.
The wrong kind of earthquake.
Yeah, it depends on your definition. I had been in California for many years, and I'd had plenty of what I call a jolt earthquake. Particularly noticeable, it sounds gross, but if you're on the toilet, you'll really notice it because you're attached to the plumbing.
Which moves.
Which moves. And you'll get a real jolt.
It's a real wake-up call.
Yeah, really. You know, there were dozens and dozens of times over the years when at night you feel the bed jiggles, and you kind of like wake up a synapse or two and check to see if it's going to get worse. And if it doesn't, you go back to sleep. One of the last earthquakes we had, the kids were little, it was summertime, it was like a 4.5, I think.
It was not a really huge earthquake.
Which is not huge.
Go.
No, not huge at all. The Loma Prieta was that a 6 something?
I don't remember.
Something like that. Anyway, that knocked buildings down and killed a couple of people in the falling down of buildings. I had come out of a mall, and the car felt like somebody was bouncing on the bumper. Now, you wouldn't do that with a modern car because the bumpers would fall off. They're not designed to do that. But in the old days, that was a standard joke. You snuck up behind somebody's car
and bounced on the bumper.
And it made the car go all wonky, wonky. And honestly, I thought somebody had snuck up on me, behind me, and I actually opened the door and got out and turned around to see who was bouncing on my bumper, and realized I could see rolling waves going across the parking lot. And I got back into the car and sat there until it stopped. Now, the place we were living in was a rental. Actually, no, that was the one we owned in conjunction with someone else. It was not damaged, but we had no power because that rolling wave had destroyed our electric substation. There are things in electric substations that stand upright and are never supposed to contact. And when you do this with the ground, all of a sudden things that are standing like this go like this. And they blew up a couple of transformers, and these are the big ones, not the kind that you could run down to the electric supply store. These are the ones they have to ship in. So there was about 2 weeks when
they
we
have
had
to
no
manufacture
power.
it specifically.
Yeah.
There's a group in California called Cal Earth that has actually designed and gotten qualified hyper Adobe, super Adobe construction techniques that pass the California earthquake code.
Right.
I don't see a lot of that actually being done.
Not in Arizona.
In Arizona.
No.
So there's specific tests that you can do and construction techniques. They work. It's a great way. You know, the way that most of these buildings work, if they're built right, is you have Adobe in a bag that gets set on top of another bag. The moisture between the bags will tend to cause the Adobe mud, the Adobe clay to migrate through and stick the bags together. So really what you're doing is making an Adobe building.
Right, and sometimes we've seen people also drive pieces of rebar. When they were concerned about the stability of a particular wall, they would drive in big pieces of rebar between bags. It's no different than pinning together railroad ties or beams to build something.
So if you're going to consider doing earth bag construction, you want to look at some good quality engineering sites. Cal Earth is one of them.
Right.
There's nothing the matter with using earth bags. Nothing the matter at all. You just need to use the right techniques. The wrong technique is to allow the bags to get exposed to ultraviolet. Cal Earth says you need to plaster the inside and the outside as you go up. And I don't mean going up 4, 5, 6 feet. I'm talking about every layer or two so that they're actually plastering as they go.
Right.
And the reason why you want to plaster is because that's going to preserve the bags long enough that the internal walls will cure and hold together. And for those of you who don't think that Adobe can hold up, you want to take a look at Casa Grande.
Right.
That's an Indian ruin from more than 1,000 years ago.
Yeah, it was still in use when the white guys got here back around the 1880s.
Now, the thing that if you look online, you'll find pictures of it today that the government has put a roof over it because the one big thing that damages Adobe buildings is water.
Yeah, you have to, they would have maintained it. I mean, it's a normal part. The people who tell me they don't want to have to re-stucco or re-plaster their buildings, I'm like, then you need to build something else. Because whether you have stucco, because we have regular stucco, or whether you have lime plaster stucco, or whether you have, whatever, it has to be redone periodically. This place has been stuccoed for, I don't know.
16 years.
16 years, yeah. And we've done some repair, not a huge amount, because we painted it. And that's another thing that keeps the plaster intact, is painting it repels the water so that the water doesn't seep in, so that you don't get freeze-thaw cycles during the wintertime, things like that.
There's a lot of things you can do with a lot of different alternative building materials, but you want to make sure that you're using the right technique.
Right.
And as much as I love my friends on YouTube, you want to make sure that you have good, solid engineering data that says what you're doing is actually going to hold up. The idea that plastic is going to last forever is a misunderstanding of how plastic works. Microbes will do as much damage to plastic, that is, microbes in the ground will do as much damage to plastic as leaving it out in the sun. There's all kinds of apocryphal stories about, I went digging through this garbage pile and this plastic bag that was buried 25 years ago was still intact and still fine. Well, no, it really wasn't. If you actually look at the structure of it, it's been weakened. And one of the problems is a lot of people building their own places with earth bags rely on the tensile strength of the bag to hold its contents in. And that's not what super adobe or hyper adobe was meant to do. That was meant to use a specific amount of clay with a specific amount of your native soil to make everything adhere together, just like adobe bricks.
Right, and if you don't have the right kind of clay in your area, you can substitute cement. Now, it costs you money, but show me how you build a house for free that doesn't cost either time or money.
Yeah, everything costs either time or money, sometimes both.
Yeah, I mean, there's some excellent videos out there about people making adobe bricks. There's a couple of special companies, well, organizations in New Mexico and mostly New Mexico that help to renovate and sustain older adobe buildings and teach people how to do the stuff. It's not an instant process. You know, if you're building with just plain brick, say you go to Home Depot or some other big box store and you buy a bunch of brick. Okay, you've got to have the brick and you've got to have the mortar, and I don't care how fast you are, it's going to take you some time because you can only go up so far before you have to let the mortar that's in between cure. And we've seen people have trouble with that too. If they're working with relatively wet mixes and they do too many layers, they start to get their walls get wobbly. And we've actually seen one family lose a
It squishes the lower layers out.
They built a place and they thought they had the right kind of clay and stuff. They didn't. And they had to take the whole darn thing down and start over again.
Yeah. Well, that's enough for today. We thought we'd just go ahead and go through the questions that we've received and answer them. If you have other questions, leave them in the comments below.
Right.
And we'll try to answer them in a future, not try, we'll answer them in a future show.
Right, right. It's fun getting questions because sometimes you're just thinking, you know, when I was cleaning up the other day and I saw that plastic bag, I said I got to mention this to people because one of the problems, say I go to buy the Hyper Adobe bags, I am buying them from the company that manufactures them. They have scientific guaranteed standards. It's no different than when I buy metal from my metal supplier to use in jewelry. I am guaranteed a specific assay. I am guaranteed that these are the things that are in that item and this is the quality. When you buy something like that, you know, there's a liability on their part. They're promising you that they have put a UV resistant chemical in there, that they have created this stuff in a specific fashion. When you buy something like feed bags or sandbags that were designed to hold feed until you fed it to your animal and then wind up in a landfill, or they were designed to, you know, they were never designed to be structural stability. Depends on the kind of feed bags you get. Some are tubes, so they've sewn on both ends. I've seen some once in a while that actually had a seam down the side. Now that totally wouldn't work because the thread that's sewing this silly thing together would rot. Even if it's a plastic thread, it's going to break faster than the bag itself. So if you're going to use something, do your very best to understand exactly what you have. Somebody who's selling bags is probably going to assume that you're repackaging something with it or using something to store something. Not that you're actually going to build with it. And can you be certain that what they're selling you is what they say they're selling you?
Time to say goodbye, Irene.
Yeah. So be sure to like, subscribe, and hit that notification bell because obviously we have tons going on. And I have a bunch of planting to do this week and all kinds of other fun things.
And I get to go out and get working on cars and
yeah, because
tractors.
the weather is actually warming up and it's not supposed to be windy all the time for the next week.
Yeah, I was supposed to work on it today, but an alarm.
An alarm, yeah.
I was supposed to work on the cars today, but it became overcast, we had more wind, and I had some other things I needed to get done.
Right.
So, well, thanks for watching. Don't forget to hit like, subscribe, and ring the bell for notifications because
Gotta keep brainstorming.
we'll talk with you later.
Bye. It's worked good. Rufus calmed right down and took a nap, and Miss Isa didn't come in and get to bug him.